What does it take for someone to forgive their family's murderers? Today, we're exploring one of the most extraordinary examples of radical forgiveness in modern history.
The story of Gladys Staines and his family really challenges our basic human instincts about justice and revenge, doesn't it?
You know, what's fascinating is that in 1960s Australia, Graham had everything most people dream of: security, comfort, opportunity. But he looked at all that and said, "There's something more important I need to do."
And that something was pretty radical, moving to India to work with leprosy patients at a time when most Westerners couldn't even point to India on a map.
Here's what makes his approach so unique. He didn't just show up with Western solutions. He learned multiple local languages, immersed himself in the culture. Records show he became fluent in Odia and several tribal dialects.
That kind of cultural sensitivity was pretty rare for that era, wasn't it? Most missionaries came with their own agendas.
Exactly. And let's talk about what he was actually doing. Working with leprosy patients who were considered untouchable in Indian society. We're talking about people who lived in isolated colonies, completely cut off from their families and communities.
The statistics from that time are staggering. India had over 4 million leprosy patients in the 1960s, with less than 10% receiving any kind of medical care.
Graham's approach was revolutionary. He didn't just treat their medical conditions. He would physically touch them, eat with them, live among them. In that culture, this was absolutely shocking behavior.
So what happened when he met Gladys? I mean, that must have been quite a conversation.
Well, instead of being deterred, she fully embraced his mission. They raised their children, Philip, Timothy, and their daughter, right there in the community. Their kids grew up seeing their parents treat these outcasts as family.
That must have shaped those children's worldview in such a profound way.
But here's where things get dark. By the late 1990s, religious tensions were rising in certain parts of India. According to court records, Graham had received multiple warnings about potential violence.
And yet he stayed. That's either incredible courage or incredible foolishness, depending on how you look at it.
In January 1999, the unthinkable happened. Graham and his two sons, Philip, 10, and Timothy, 6, were sleeping in their vehicle when a mob attacked. They set the vehicle on fire with all three inside.
The media coverage from that time shows the entire nation was shocked. Even those who opposed missionary work condemned the brutality of the attack.
But here's what transformed this from a tragedy into something that shook the world: Gladys Staines' response. When reporters gathered, expecting calls for justice or revenge, she said something that made headlines globally.
Those words, "I forgive the men who killed my husband and children. Hatred will only bring more hatred." They're still quoted in Indian textbooks today.
And she didn't just say it, she lived it. She stayed in India, continued their work, raised her daughter there. The leprosy hospital they started still operates today, treating over 2,000 patients annually.
That's what makes this story so powerful. It wasn't just about words, it was about actions.
The impact was enormous. According to Indian media archives, her forgiveness did more to challenge religious prejudices than decades of activism. Even hardline groups had to reconsider their positions.
You know what's interesting? Their story has become a case study in conflict resolution programs worldwide.
And here's something few people know. The main perpetrator, who was sentenced to death, had his sentence commuted to life imprisonment after Gladys herself appealed for mercy.
That level of forgiveness, it's almost beyond comprehension.
You know what really strikes me? They never sought attention. No social media, no publicity campaigns. They just quietly served for decades. It was the authenticity of their lives that gave such power to their story.
And in the end, that's what couldn't be destroyed. Their legacy of love and forgiveness.
The ripple effects continue today. Beyond the hospital and schools they established, their story has become a touchstone for people wrestling with questions of forgiveness and reconciliation.
It really forces us to ask ourselves some hard questions about how we'd respond in similar circumstances.
And maybe that's where we should leave it, with those questions hanging in the air. What would we do? How would we respond? Because in the end, those are the questions that really matter.